The mystery of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, the controversial relationship that honestly shaped American history and was finally confirmed by science and scholarship. Few questions in American history have generated as much debate and emotion as the one surrounding Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. Did the author of the Declaration of Independence, the third President of the United States, and one of the most celebrated figures of the American founding, father children with a woman he enslaved? For almost 2 centuries, this question was treated as rumor, scandal, or outright falsehood, and generations of historians either dismissed it or denied it outright. Yet today, after years of careful scholarship and the undeniable evidence of modern science, the consensus is clear. Jefferson did indeed father the children of Sally Hemings, and this truth has forced Americans to confront not only the private life of a founding father, but also the realities of slavery, power, and race in the early republic. The story began publicly in 1802, when a journalist named James Thompson Callender published a sensational accusation in the press. Callender was a political opponent of Jefferson and hoped to tarnish his reputation by claiming that Jefferson had, for years, kept one of his enslaved women as his concubine and that she bore his children. The woman he named was Sally Hemings, a young enslaved woman of mixed ancestry who lived at Monticello. Callender's story shocked the nation, and it was repeated widely, but Jefferson himself never publicly responded, nor did he ever issue a denial. In the deeply divided politics of the early 19th century, the rumor became both a weapon against him and a subject of gossip, but many of his supporters dismissed it as slander invented by his enemies. For nearly 200 years, the question persisted, and for most of that time, the dominant response of historians was to reject the possibility outright. The idea that Jefferson had fathered children with Sally Hemings was uncomfortable to those who wished to preserve his image as a man of Enlightenment virtue, and it was dismissed as an impossible scandal. Early historians often revealed their racial biases in their treatment of the story. They described the accounts of the enslaved community as unreliable, ignored oral traditions among the Hemings descendants, and treated Jefferson's reputation as untouchable. As a result, the story was labeled as rumor, and for generations textbooks and biographies portrayed it as a falsehood. This began to change in the late 20th century, when new voices began to challenge the dismissive attitudes that had dominated historical writing. Among them was Annette Gordon-Reed, a lawyer and historian who in the 1990s began carefully re-evaluating the evidence surrounding Jefferson and Hemings. In her groundbreaking book, Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, An American Controversy, she demonstrated that historians had long been biased in their treatment of the story. She showed how the testimony of enslaved people had been discredited because of race, how evidence had been twisted to protect Jefferson's reputation, and how the pattern of Sally Hemings' children's births lined up exactly with the times when Jefferson was at Monticello. Her work broke open the debate and forced the scholarly community to reconsider long-held assumptions. The decisive turning point came in 1998 when, modern science entered the picture. A team of researchers conducted a DNA study comparing the Y chromosome of male line descendants of Jefferson's family with that of descendants of Eston Hemings, one of Sally Hemings' youngest sons. The results were, frankly, striking. Eston Hemings shared a genetic match with the Jefferson male line. Now, this did not prove absolutely that Thomas Jefferson himself was the father, but given the context, it ruled out many other possibilities. The only Jefferson males who could have been present at Monticello during the time Sally Hemings conceived her children were Thomas Jefferson himself, and no one else in the family fits the circumstances. The DNA evidence, therefore, strongly supported what oral history had claimed all along, that Thomas Jefferson fathered Eston Hemings, and by extension was almost certainly the father of Sally Hemings' other children. In January 2000, the Thomas Jefferson Foundation, which oversees Monticello, convened a special committee of scholars to review all the available evidence. They examined the DNA findings, oral traditions and historical documents, and their conclusion was clear. Jefferson was the father of Eston Hemings, and it was highly probable that he fathered all 6 of Sally Hemings' children listed in Monticello's records. This report marked a decisive shift, and since then the majority of historians and institutions have accepted this conclusion. Supporting evidence beyond DNA also, strengthens the case. Jefferson freed only members of the Hemings family in his will, while other enslaved families remained in bondage. This unusual act suggests special concern and connection. He never publicly acknowledged the children, but they went on to live lives that reflected their unusual status. Eston Hemings, for example, moved to Ohio and later Wisconsin, where he lived as a white man and became a respected musician. His brother, Madison Hemings, gave an interview later in life in which he directly stated that Jefferson was his father. These accounts, which had long been ignored, were finally given the weight they deserved in light of the scientific evidence. The acceptance of this truth has had profound implications, not just for Jefferson's legacy, but for the way Americans think about history. It highlights the contradictions of a man who wrote that all men are created equal, while at the same time holding more than 600 people in bondage. It forces a reckoning with the fact that the founding of the United States was entangled with the realities of slavery and racial inequality. It also restores dignity to the descendants of Sally Hemings, who for generations were told that their oral traditions were not credible. Today, they are recognized as part of Jefferson's family. Most historians now agree that the case is settled. Jefferson and Hemings had a long relationship that produced children. It is not entirely clear whether the relationship began in Paris, when Hemings was a teenager and Jefferson was serving as ambassador, or later at Monticello, but what is certain is that it lasted for decades and shaped the lives of her children. The story is no longer dismissed as scandal or rumour, but accepted as a part of Jefferson's complex life and legacy. The Jefferson-Hemings controversy shows how history is not fixed, but constantly re-evaluated in light of new evidence and new perspectives. It demonstrates how voices once ignored can eventually be vindicated, and how modern methods like DNA testing can provide clarity to questions once thought unanswerable. It also reminds us that history is not only about great men and lofty ideals, but about the lived experiences of enslaved women and their children who were long denied recognition. In the end, the mystery that began as a political smear in 1802 has been resolved by the cumulative weight of evidence. The truth is that Thomas Jefferson did father the children of Sally Hemings, and their descendants live on today as a testament to a story once denied but finally acknowledged. The tale forces us to see Jefferson not as a flawless hero, but as a human being full of contradictions, both capable of penning words that inspired freedom and of maintaining a system that denied freedom to others. It is a story that challenges us to confront the past honestly and to recognize that history often hides painful truths that eventually must come to light.